Good morning, and thank you for joining AccelOps webinar on greater visibility of advanced threats going beyond SIEM. My name is Mike Reinhardt. I'm the VP of Marketing here at AccelOps. I'm also joined by Dan Hanman, who is our UK sales engineer. Dan will be guiding us through some of the technical parts of our presentation. I'll be kind of giving you some background to set the stage, and then I'll be turning that over to Dan. You're all in a muted mode. We will be taking questions via the Questions tab in your GoToWebinar session. Happy to answer questions as they come up, as well as at the end, and then we'll have some additional information as to how to get a demo set up. So to start, Dan, if you could advance the slide to one more. So a quick overview of who AccelOps is and some of our background. We've been founded since 2007. We call ourselves a third generation SIEM, security incident and event management software platform. That's because the two first iterations were from a previous company that our founder had developed, a company called Protego Networks that was actually acquired by Cisco. Cisco ended up using that as the platform for their Mars product. Partha, who's our CTO and founder, developed that platform and has developed this one as kind of the next generation iteration of that product line. We focus on not only just security, but performance and compliance monitoring and management. We have a patented analytics platform that does a really good job about cross-correlating data points throughout your network, very unique to the market, and we'll go through some of those capabilities. We currently have over 6 million endpoints being monitored with customers around the world on 6 continents, as well as partners. We also have an extensible threat intelligence center, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. And we're a virtual appliance, meaning that there's no hardware associated with our solution, and that gives you faster time to value to get to the capabilities that we offer quickly and easily as you initially install as well as you scale. Just to kind of give you the ecosystem that we're in today, on the left you'll see some of our managed service providers that are currently selling our product, system integrators as well. Companies like Optiv, Fintech, Agio. And then in our technology alliance partner platform, this is where we've developed integrations with many of our technology partners in the same space. People like Fortinet, Palo Alto, and Checkpoint for the firewall side, but also ticketing systems like ServiceNow, cloud services like Amazon, Microsoft Azure, and even Salesforce. We've got some interesting things to talk about around that. And then our customer list on the right-hand side, some of our key customers today, number of sporting organizations, the NHL, Go Sharks, and Staples being one of our larger customers that we have recently signed. Staples has all their retail stores using our product currently today. So a number of companies across a various wide array of verticals in the healthcare finance space, as well as higher educational institutions, large corporations, and governmental accounts. The key differentiators, the things that really set AccelOps aside from other SIEM vendors, are some really unique capabilities. Again, we're the only NOC and SOC solution through a single pane of glass. Our platform is able to take data points from the traditional network operations center world, match that with the security operations center world, and provide that to you in a single pane of glass view of all the elements in your network. We're able to, in real time, cross-correlate those data points and provide you with information about security threats in real time again, providing rapid identification, the ability to quickly triage those events, and then help you prevent those in the future. We also have a very powerful automated device discovery engine in that it's able to crawl the network and develop all the devices and context of all the devices attached to the network into a topology mapping tool that's also real-time and kept in a self-learning mode to monitor any changes to that network environment. And then, as I mentioned, our Threat Intelligence Center, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our demonstration today, continually providing updates on threat data that we're seeing from the millions of devices that are connected to our network, but also the ability to ingest feeds from other organizations that are playing our same ecosystem. And the last point is the multi-tenant architecture. This is very key to some of our managed service providers, but also organizations that have diverse elements in their organization that they want to monitor and manage separately. So for example, if you're doing payment card processing, you might want to look at just your PCI environment as a standalone, but also have the ability to look at your overall network infrastructure. Our tool makes that really easy to get up and view both logical and physical network topologies, and put them into a reporting environment that makes it easy for you to view them and provide the people that need access to that reporting data quickly and easily. So just to kind of give the state of the state, Gartner says that breaches and attacks are inevitable. It's becoming a huge problem, as you read in the paper every day. A recent study done by Ponemon Institute asked a number of large organizations, how many of you have seen a material breach to your network or your systems? Nearly half of them had identified that. The other kind of interesting statistic is that today it takes 250 days on average to detect when an attack has occurred. That's a big number, but it's actually less than last year. That's the good news. The downside, though, is that those breaches are typically discovered by somebody outside of the organization. So somebody in the credit card company industry is getting a call from their end user saying, hey, my card seems to have been hacked. The credit card company is going back to those organizations and saying, it looks like your records have been breached. We have a customer who's been affected. And that's typically how they're hearing about that information and not detecting it themselves. It's a big problem. I mean, it's happening across the world today with various different organizations and different types of organizations. And it really stems from this typical NOC and SOC environment. This is, you've got a number of IT professionals that are working on multiple teams, sometimes with different leaders, different systems, different tools. The NOC has their list of tools that they may have acquired both, day one, but also organically as their organization has grown. And Dan, if you'll click on that one more time. These are some of the typical tools you'll see in those environments. Nagios, Kaseya is very typical on the NOC side. NetIQ, Tripwire, even Sumo Logic, kind of a semi-competitor to AccelOps. But again, you've got a number of different tools recording a number of different data events. They are not cross-correlated, or they are not providing context across the organization through a single tool. It's a number of different data silos that are being collected, and typically it's very, very hard to get these siloed departments to talk to each other until something bad has occurred. The other thing, Dan, if you click one more time, is the ticketing systems that these folks use. Sometimes they're using a similar platform, and many times they're using separate platforms because each department has acquired those tools on their own based on their own specific needs. So there may not be a way to cross-correlate that even through the ticketing system. Typical resolution processes, most of the time it's a reactive versus a proactive scenario. So an event has occurred, it's been indicated throughout the organization. Then it's now the job is looking at the forensics after the attack has occurred. So it's all hands on deck, pulling all the IT resources out of the field, out of their normal day-to-day work, and they're bringing all their sources of data to the table to try to figure out where did the breach occur. They don't have a single source for identifying those breaches. They don't have analytics that easily cross-correlates that information. It's a very manual process. It's a rearview mirror historical versus real-time process. And it also adds the potential for additional risks while they're pulled out of the field to deal with this one breach that they've had through their network. While they're doing that, there could be other bad things occurring when nobody's watching the shop. So the impacts, I mean, obviously there's going to be impacts to revenue and dollars, both in terms of customers not wanting to buy from a company that's got problems with credit card information being hacked or breached, potential for medical institutions and patients not wanting to do business with a doctor who's not keeping their records safe and secure. It also impacts the brand, though. I mean, it really does have an impact on the reputation of the companies that are being impacted, because those are going to be newsworthy events in many cases, and really does not put a good slant on your marketing and brand efforts. It also impacts service level agreements with some of your suppliers or even your end customers as to the network's performance in support of their needs. Also opens the business up to lawsuits and fines and the dollars associated with that. You know, Target's a good example of that, where the credit card breaches now totaled up to about $1 billion after all of the attorney fees, fines, customer loss of revenue, et cetera. So it's a very material number. And then these unhappy customers take a long time to win back, and it's very expensive to win a brand new customer as opposed to keeping one on your books on a day-to-day basis. It also impacts worker productivity as well, and not to mention the C-levels. And now boards of directors are getting involved in the security decisions because it's really impacting the stock, the company's brand, but potentially even their own livelihood as well as their own future careers. There was a recent study that was done by ESG for ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a ticketing company, if you're not familiar with them. The survey said, it went out to a large group of IT professionals and said, what is the most important thing that you need for incident response excellence, given today's environment? And the top 3 answers we're going to go through here real quick. The number 1 answer was that the need for security and IT tools to be integrated. 31% of the respondents said that, but also the ability to understand the context of that security incident. How does that impact my critical assets? What applications are going to be impacted? What work groups are going to be impacted? I don't have that context today, but that would be great if I could have that information. And then the ability to, as we saw in the previous slides, you've got a number of security tools in the organization, each of them collecting different sets of data, none of them talking to each other or cross-correlating that information. So analytics are very difficult to extract from that are meaningful and have actionable capabilities based on that. So many organizations have turned to a SIEM tool like AccelOps. I mean, we are a SIEM tool with basic capabilities that Gartner has outlined in their Magic Quadrant profile. Gartner says that the SIEM must have analytics capabilities, the ability to do application log analysis, profiling of behavior, data and user monitoring, to be able to see deployment and support simplicity. So as an organization grows, organization wants to apply a SIEM tool to their organization, it must be easy. Obviously, log management is key. Real-time monitoring is a top concern. And then the ability to ingest threat intelligence feeds into the tool. So these are the basic requirements that Gartner, again, has defined as what is a SIEM, what does the SIEM need? And I'm going to turn it over to Dan after this because we really add additional context beyond the basics that Gartner's laid out and adding these additional capabilities that I'm going to turn it over to Dan to talk about.
Thanks, Mike. So what we've seen actually out talking to customers and real experiences is that there's critical capabilities that are needed to allow analysts to make informed and quick and accurate decisions. And these capabilities are around a CMDB. Now, I still go into many organizations and even enterprise organizations, and I talk to them about what devices have they got in the network, what are those devices, where are they, who are the device or their service or the asset owners. And they'll refer to a spreadsheet or they'll refer to a CMDB that was updated the last time or when they actually implemented these services. What AccelOps also provides is an up-to-date and accurate CMDB as well, so you can understand who the business owners are, what impact incidents are having against particular assets, but also what business services. And it will contain information about patches, processes, configurations of routers, switches, and firewalls. So we see this as a key capability, allowing you to make more informed decisions. And also there's real-time and cross-correlation, which Mike mentions about security and operations. Very often we've seen events, we go in doing some security analytic reports, and we'll find misconfigured systems. And it's very easy then for us to give this across the network operation teams to be able to investigate using this single pane of glass, using AccelOps, because they can still access and look at their performance, their metric data, as well as the security data. The cloud scale architecture is really quite unique to AccelOps because not only are we a virtual appliance, so we're very quick to deploy, we deploy on top of your existing infrastructure, but we can scale out as your performance or your capability needs change. And this is the cloud scale, so it's a scalar architecture. And where Mike mentioned about patented technology, we also have distributed rule correlation. So this is very unique, which means we can take in events from all different areas of the network and correlate it across this very large data set, very large amount of events. Multi-tenancy, if you're a service provider, this is a critical capability, being able to have separate tenancies within a single platform, a true cloud platform. And we've always been able to do this. And this is one of the reasons why we're so favored by service providers. And the last point, rapid and flexible integration framework. So I'll talk about that in a little while as I go through some of the other slides. But we've got an integration framework such as REST APIs and other APIs to allow you to integrate with AccelOps as well. Let's move on to the topic of today, which is around advanced persistent threats. We've heard APTs in the media for a number of years, and we're going to try to demonstrate how you can start to detect some of these more advanced threats. But let's give it the definition first of all. An advanced threat is really where you see advanced use of techniques. Once a compromise actually happens, your system is breached, it will remain persistent for some time. We've already seen that the average detection period is 256 days, but we've seen malicious activity and compromises that have gone undetected for years, exfiltrating data over a very long period of time. And then there's the threat, the actual capability, and there's a real intention. And the techniques that are being used are typically things like spear phishing, very common, social engineering, zero-day exploits, and either custom or polymorphic types of malware. Malware that can evade endpoint protections, typical antivirus systems. Who are the threat actors? Who are these people that are going to use advanced persistent threats? Well, we've categorized them here, and this is the typical categorization that you'll see as nation states, organized crime, cyber terrorists, hacktivists, and the nuisance or hobbyist or commodity type threats that you'll typically see. The ones where we'll see more persistence are national states and organized crime. And certainly the nation state threat actors will be using advanced threats or advanced persistent threats. Organized crime, we'll see them using those, but their motivation is mainly financial, so they may not go into the system, exfiltrate some data, perform some transactions which are going to have some financial gain to them, and then leave. They may no longer stay within that system. Cyber terrorists can also use advanced threats. They've certainly got these capabilities. But often we'll see off-the-shelf tools being used. And that's not to say that these off-the-shelf tools are immature. They can be very sophisticated as well. But they're readily available to be used. How do we actually go about stopping an advanced threat? Well, there's no single technology. There's no silver bullet that will stop an advanced threat. So we need to have multiple layers of technology. And we need to do this up the stack, so we need your firewalls, your proxies, your IDS, IPSs, your UTMs. We need these technologies to be in place, but the threat is also from the BYOD, the endpoints themselves, and having adequate protection against your endpoints is very important. And also we're exposing lots of services through our firewalls these days. So VPN connections, business services, intranets, extranets, all these can also be allowing direct connectivity into your network. So it's important to deploy the right technology, configure it correctly, and actually monitor it. Only very recently I was at an organization. They've got a very sophisticated firewall and IPS, IDS modules which are enabled, and they're sending events and generating alerts, but nobody really looks at these and nobody's really tuning those. So they've got a great technology at their disposal, but it's not being maximized and not obtaining the expected value from it. So deploy the right technology, use it and configure it. But to do that, you need the right people. So we need to be resourced correctly, skilled at driving the various tools, and also being able to interpret the actual results that these tools provide. Now, being in the security domain, there's very few of us unemployed in this domain, so getting those correctly skilled and resourced people is somewhat of a challenge to many organizations. And lastly is the process. So this is that triad, the people, process, technology triad that we often talk about. So we need the right processes. Have you got a security working group? Do you get together every month, every week with the various C-levels, the security managers, operation managers, the actual security team? Do you have a security team? If not, maybe form this security working group and discuss what your intentions are, what your roadmap is, and what your risks are and your critical assets. So perform risk assessments. So having this process, things like security working groups, understanding what you'll do when there is an incident, understanding these asset owners. If an incident occurs, who are you going to contact as well? And what impact potential incidents can have on the business. And this is all part of a risk assessment, but understanding these things will help you reduce the mean time to any resolution. Another key metric that we look at is mean time to resolutions. So we can discuss that shortly. A particular pattern or common pattern that's described when we're talking about an advanced threat is across here. So what we'll typically see is the actor performing some sort of reconnaissance. This could be via social networking, it could be more technical reconnaissance, scanning for open ports, identifying IP addresses that belong to an organization. And once this reconnaissance period has been completed, if it ever actually ends, we'll see an intrusion within the network. And then we'll see a persistence or foothold being gained. Foothold has been gained, there's often a lateral movement. This means that the attacker will then move to other assets within the network, be those servers or other network devices, and again trying to achieve another foothold as it moves within your network. As it's moving through your network, it's looking for particular targets as well. And once that target is attained, there's often some data collection, so we'll find data being extracted from databases, particular files being copied, stored in a location. They may be zipped, they may be encrypted. So often things like DLP tools will struggle to detect these, especially if they're encrypted or encoded. And then finally, we'll see some data exfiltration. So we'll see the data leaving the network. And the different threat actors will appear in different areas. Often nuisance types of threats, these commodity threats, will just settle at an intrusion. They may go all the way through to data exfiltration, but they're sometimes happy with just an intrusion. They've succeeded to breach a network. Hacktivists, again, they may be happy with an intrusion or just a defacement. And I just say just a defacement. I don't use that lightly, but that could be far less severe than data exfiltration within the network. But other threat actors will go all the way if the others don't as well. And really their goal is exfiltration of data. And along the bottom, we've got the mean time to detection. The longer the mean time it takes us to detect these various activities in the network, the greater the impact. So where we want to catch this is at the intrusion, or before the intrusion, at the reconnaissance. The earlier we can get that, the lower the impact, if any impact, will be within the organization. So let's assume we've got the basics. We've got secure configurations. We've done some hardening. We've disabled services on our systems. We've changed the default passwords on service accounts and applications. We've got patch management, and you may be familiar with the patch and be damned. It's better to patch a system and have the system go down than to leave a system vulnerable. So we've got some good patch management going on. User access controls, firewalls, be those UTMs or traditional firewalls, and antivirus and malware protection. These are defined as cyber essential requirements. You could look at the SANS critical controls and also employ those within your environment. But what's next? Once we've got the basics, what's the next step? Well, you should be considering a SIEM. Hopefully, AccelOps will be on your list. Many attacks are blended, sophisticated, evade detection. They're very long and very slow. They could happen over days, weeks, months. So detecting those can be very difficult. But when you are breached, where will you look? Where will that forensic team come in and actually look in your network? Well, they may come in and take an image of hosts. They may look at configurations to see if they've been modified. But they'll certainly be asking you for the logs within the environment so that they can go back through, check the logs to see what's happened on that particular host. But that's very reactive, and what we want to do is catch this threat as early as possible. So we need to be more proactive. There's lots we can do with just log information, but if there's some help available for us to detect these threats earlier, then that's always going to be welcome. So I want to introduce threat intelligence and watch lists in this webinar today. Threat intelligence is the first area of topic, and we're going to discuss how we can integrate these and use these within AccelOps. And there's lots of different threat intelligence providers out there, but what do they actually provide? Well, we've got these three kind of statements about threat intelligence. Unknown unknowns. That's where we are today with no threat intelligence, and we're just collecting the data from the devices. So we've got no idea that we're going to be attacked or data exfiltrated to command and control servers. So this is really where we've got no idea what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. And the more intelligence that we get, we can start to move across to known unknowns. So we might know that we're going to be attacked on the 25th of May, or we might know a specific IP address, or another artifact like a malware hash. We might have some data, so we know something, but there's still lots of unknowns. And then there's known knowns. This is where we're going to be attacked on a particular date using a particular method, and maybe data is going to be exfiltrated to the C2 server. This would be great. This is operational intelligence. Unfortunately, it's almost like a unicorn. This very rarely ever occurs, if ever, in cybersecurity, this level of detail. So threat intelligence is going to allow us to understand particular indicators of compromise. It's going to give us this known unknown state. Okay, so technical or threat intelligence is really technical intelligence. And it's data rather than actionable information that you could take away and use within your SOC, your analysis. And it's also got a short change quite frequently. You will often see they'll update every half an hour, every hour, or a few times a day. And they will contain these addresses, domains, and hashes. And bringing this data into AccelOps is actually quite straightforward. We have built-in support already that can be utilized for threat intelligence feeds, open source threat intelligence feeds, and it's a simple case of going into AccelOps through the graphical interface and scheduling the updates. And when you schedule these updates, we'll bring in things like the block domains, malware domain lists, the Zeus domains, SANS domains, blocked IP addresses. So we'll bring in emerging threat blocked IP addresses. Things like the Zeus blocked IP addresses, malware hashes. So if you've got hashes or lists, you can also bring this information in to AccelOps as well, and anomaly networks as well. So we're able to bring this data in, and to do this is, as I say, it's built in. So it's just a case of scheduling that into AccelOps to bring in this data. But you can extend the built-in threat feeds in AccelOps, either by using commercial threat feeds, and one example is anomaly or threat stream, as they were formerly called, and bringing in external or commercial threat feeds. Well, what's the advantage of that over using open or public threat feeds? Well, commercial threat feeds will often provide you with more context. You can drill down against these artifacts, the IP addresses, and understand more information about their IP address. Who else has seen these IP addresses targeting their systems? So it's giving you more relevance, more information that you can perform actions upon. We've also got an extensible and open API, so you can extend AccelOps threat feed integration to support other commercial threat feeds or open source threat feeds. And then there's open source. So this is great. There's one example here called MSSec, and it's Combine. It's great because it's going to go out to a wide variety of threat feeds on the internet, open source intelligence, bring those together and actually integrate it into a single feed. So you can integrate open source threat feeds very easily. CSVs are very straightforward, just using the actual graphical user interface as well. And there may be closed user groups, closed communities that might be sharing data as well that you can subscribe to, especially federal customers and government customers. Now, I just want to introduce something called Combine. So if you're an existing AccelOps customer, if you log on to the support portal, you'll find this partner guide, which will give you a step-by-step guide of how to integrate the Combine threat feeds into AccelOps. It's a very straightforward process of downloading, installing Combine. It's an application, you get it off GitHub. You run an AccelOps transform script, and then you integrate it through the actual graphical user interface. And when I did this earlier in the week, I managed to download about 56,000 IP addresses that are then brought into AccelOps. We'll then look for any traffic in real time. So this could be flow data, traffic from your firewalls, log data. If we see any traffic going to these IP addresses or going from these IP addresses, we could immediately generate an incident and tell you about it. And to actually configure this in the user interface, it's as simple as these steps. So you define an actual threat feed in AccelOps, and you define what the data mappings are. If you're an existing AccelOps customer, or you do this as part of a test or a proof of concept, you'll see how simple this is. And then once we've got this data in, we can start to represent this in dashboards. This is a dashboard that I created very quickly. It took me about 15 minutes to create this dashboard. And it's giving us visibility of traffic that's either coming from threat intelligence IP addresses. We're seeing traffic going to, so we can actually see data transfer. We can see the locations plotted on geographical maps. So we're looking up IP addresses in real time and plotting these on geographical maps. And there's lots of ways you can represent this data as well, not just in table and map views, but you can also do pie charts, bar charts, scatter graphs, tree map views. So you can represent this data however you want. So bringing this technical threat intelligence data in is going to help us later when we're looking for advanced threats. And this is an analytic query as well. It's a little bit clearer than the other screenshot which we had there. But we can see here that there's a source IP address which was on a threat feed, and we've seen data transfer as well. For me, as an analyst, if I saw this and I can be alerted through a rule, or if I'm running an analytic query, if I saw this, I'd immediately start to jump on this and try to understand why I'm seeing this data transfer. And we can then pivot across from AccelOps into other tools. I've just included one here, which is the Abuse IP database, but you can immediately pivot across and open up other external resources in AccelOps so that you can bring in more intelligence. This is somewhat similar to some of the commercial threat feeds can provide, but they tend to go more in depth than something like Abuse IP database. Okay, to introduce watch lists. A watch list is a smart container of similar items that need close monitoring. So it could be IP addresses, usernames. There is something that's of significant interest. With AccelOps, we've got many of these included out of the box, so things like accounts locked, authentication issues, DNS violators, as well as performance or availability issues. So we've got hardware issues also listed on the watch lists. This can affect availability, one of the 3 pillars of security as well. So it's nice to know about these sorts of operational issues that are occurring in the environment. Now, watch lists can be used to populate information about, in this case, port scans. So this rule that's being defined is looking for a scan, a port scan, and it's mainly denied traffic, but it's then followed by permitted traffic. This could signify a scan of various ports, and a particular port has been detected as being open. Now, when that occurs, we know we've got some IP address that's scanning our network. We want to add that to a watch list of host scanners. Now, if we see any further activity, level activity, we can generate an instance and tell us about it through an email or integration with some workflow or ticketing system. But now we've got an indicator as well. This may not be on a threat feed. This is our own intelligence that we've detected. This could be the initial reconnaissance that we're seeing as part of an APT. So let's look at a use case for detecting an advanced threat. We've got several listed here, and some are more complex use cases than others. And what we're really going to look at is number 4, monitoring a business service that is exposed to the internet. And often offenses inform defenses. And this is what we're going to do for this use case. This scenario we're going to work through, this use case, is actually a real scenario that we saw at one of our customers. So we're going to reproduce this in AccelOps so that we can be notified as early as possible during this ATP. And how are we going to do this? Well, we've already mentioned about a particular rule that can detect some early reconnaissance, a port scan, and detection of an open port. So we're going to have a rule that triggers and notifies us of this reconnaissance, and then adds the IP address of the scanning system to the watch list. We'll then see some successful authentications, but it could be failed authentications that also occur. Dropping of malware, this is typically the persistence, the foothold, a possible pass the hash events that occur. This is the lateral movement. We're seeing movement now within the actual environment. Target attainment, identification of key database servers, data collection. This could be the creation of a file on disk. And how can you detect that? You can use file integrity monitoring to help detect that. And also then data exfiltration. So we're going to try and catch this APT as early as possible at the reconnaissance phase. So the early reconnaissance, deploying the rules, and the rules that I'm going to discuss here are also going to be available on the AccelOps support forum so that you can download these and implement them in your environment as well. Many of these rules are actually out of the box, so there's nothing you really need to do any further. But a few are some custom rules we've defined here. An example here is the heavy TCP port scan, this early reconnaissance that happened. And then we see some additional events that occur. What we actually see are 3 events: a brute force logon success, authentication attempts by a known house scanner, and multiple logon failures. Now, the brute force logon success will trigger if we see a number of failed logons followed by a successful logon within a period of time. And the same with multiple logon failures. If we see multiple logon failures within a short period of time, we'll generate an incident. That's all very well if it's occurring in a short period of time, hours or several hours. But if we're seeing a long and slow attack, a typical type of APT operandi, then the rule authentication attempts by a known house scanner is more likely to catch that attack, because we've seen malicious activity by an IP address, and then it was followed by authentication attempts from that IP address as well. So this is where the actual intrusion is happening in the network. And this was the rule that we were looking at earlier, the port scan, where we added the host to the actual host scanners. And this is the actual rule that we defined in AccelOps, where we saw a source IP address was in the house scanner group. And then we also saw that the source IP address of the authentication failures were either successes or logons. And this is how you can define rules in AccelOps. It's very straightforward. So the persistence and foothold. Well, we detected that through a number of different means. One of those is actually through the file integrity monitoring. The file integrity monitoring identifies registry change and a file being dropped on to a compromised system. In this case, it was this system here, the instant target, the ERP system. And the AccelOps Windows agent, which is available, also performs this file integrity monitoring function as well as collecting events from your devices. So it's looking for any changes. And as soon as we picked up this change, this malware hash, or the hash, was looked against the threat feeds, our threat feeds that we've integrated, and it was determined that this malware, this hash, was actually on one of the threat feeds. So it's another point where we could have detected this attack. And then we see some lateral movement. So a possible pass the hash event was found in the Windows logs. Now, sometimes these possible pass hash events could be a false positive. But when we combine this together with other events that we've seen, such as the registry changes, the malware hashes, and the multiple or brute force authentications that are happening against this asset, we can be fairly certain that this is a real security incident. And then from the lateral movement, we're going to see the target attainment and the data collection. An example here of the data collection is actually an excessively slow Microsoft SQL Server database query. This is a performance-related event. This isn't collected through security logs. This is where additional context being brought into your SIEM platform, such as the performance metrics, will give you greater visibility. So AccelOps is directly monitoring this database server. We've detected that there's been a database query that's been running for 50 minutes. This will generate an incident. This is the point where we're understanding data collection. Somebody's doing a 4-table scan. And then finally, we're seeing some data exfiltration. And there's 3 instances that have triggered in this case. We're seeing a large outbound of transfer of data outside of my country. So we've defined our home country as the United States, but we're seeing a lot of data transferring outside to this target IP address, which is somewhere in the Ukraine. We saw about 8 megabytes. Okay. If this was a slow transfer of data, smaller than 8 megabytes, would this incident have triggered? It may not have. And the same regarding a large outbound transfer. If this was going over a longer period of time, we may not have detected it. Actually, this top event we would have detected if it's going outside the country, but the actual instant target where this data is being transferred doesn't need to be outside of the United States, if that's my home country. It could be an IP within the United States. But what we've also got here, this additional instant that's triggered, is permitted traffic to an AccelOps Combine threat feed list. So we've actually seen that this instant target is potentially a C2, a command and control server, somewhere on the instant that others have seen, and we've brought this intelligence in. So even if this was within the United States, it wasn't a transfer over to my country, and it was very small transfer data over a long period of time that built up, we would still detect this. So this is at the point where you can understand the data exfiltration. So at every point, we've detected incidents that are going to occur through the reconnaissance all the way through the data exfiltration, based on an example that we've seen with another customer environment, very similar to this. So that you have got opportunities to protect your environment from advanced threats, but it requires getting the visibility and deploying against the correct use cases. And this is where real-time alerting and analytics will really come into play as well. And if we unfortunately have got this data exfiltration, it's really game over. It's bad news. We've kind of missed the boat to a degree. We should have been catching it sooner. And should is an easy thing to say. It's more difficult to do it in real life, obviously. So this is really one example of how we can use AccelOps to monitor your environment and help you detect these advanced threats. So I'm going to open it up to some questions.
Good job, Dan. Yeah, we've got a number of questions here on the web. We'll start with the first one. The question is AccelOps able to take syslog data from a Cisco ASA, and can VPN logins be distinguished through that?
Absolutely, no problem at all. So we support a wide range of devices. It's very straightforward to integrate these with AccelOps. We would actually, from an AccelOps point of view, go beyond just receiving syslog from, say, a Cisco ASA. We'd want to build up what that device is, the interface security levels as an example, the IP addresses and the configuration of the device. We'd want to build that and put that into the CMDB within AccelOps. And that's done automatically through the discovery process as well.
Great. Another question is, the rules that you mentioned, where would those be located?
So many of the rules that I've discussed today are out-of-the-box rules. Any of the custom rules, if the customers wish to log on to the AccelOps support forum, there'll be a forum post with the partner guide for integrating Combine with AccelOps, as well as the various dashboard reports and the dashboard itself and the actual rules themselves to download. So simply log on to accelops.zendesk.com and you'll be able to download this information.
Great. I'm just going through the list here real quick. The question was the example custom rules that you displayed today in our presentation, are those available on the portal currently?
We will have them on the Zendesk portal, which is our support portal, by the end of the day.
Okay. Another question about the use of the out-of-the-box rules that come with the product. Does it also require a lot of custom plugins to make that work?
No, they don't require custom plugins. It requires data. So it requires the events from your devices, your applications, and bringing that data into AccelOps to be able to for the rules to trigger. But in terms of real customization or agents or specific configuration, no, not at all.
Great. A couple folks have asked about the recording. Yes, we are recording this event, and we'll provide a link to that for those that weren't able to attend live or weren't able to stay for the whole session. But this will be available to all the folks that register for the event, as well as beyond that for any others that you might want to forward this to. A couple other questions. Can I look these IP addresses that were identified up on external websites for more context about who they are, what they are?
Yes, it's very straightforward to configure something called external lookup within AccelOps. It's on the admin screen of AccelOps. You can configure external sites to look up and essentially pass the IP address off to these external sites and bring them in. There was one example which I used in the presentation about the IP address database, and that's where you can pivot across directly into other systems and bring in this intelligence. I also see on here, Mike, as well, one of the questions regarding OSSEC data source supported. Yes, we can receive OSSEC events as well. Mike, you still there?
Yes, I'm talking to the mute button. Sorry about that. Just reminding the audience, if you do have a question, please use the question section on the GoToWebinar session. If you just click on the little arrow to the left of the word that says questions, you can type in any questions that you might have to the team here.
I also noticed that AWS log supported, a CloudTrail. Yes, it is supported as a data source as well.
As well as Microsoft Azure in that same category.
Indeed.
Recently added to the team.
I see there, is there a limit to the number of IOCs, IP addresses that the CMDB can hold? There's a practical limit in terms of what any one can hold. You can have multiple threat feeds configured in AccelOps, and we try to work around a 200,000 IOCs in a particular threat feed. That's kind of the optimal limit, which is still a significant number of IOCs. And IOCs are not the whole story, they're just one part of the story as well. So, yeah. Are there 200,000 bad IP addresses out there, or is it far fewer? Maybe it's a mixture of both.
Yeah. I see a question specifically about Alien Vault 2 is kind of a competitor in our space, and how do we differentiate ourselves? I can give you a couple examples, but I would be happy to have you talk to your account representative who's probably got some additional ones we could add. I would point you to the Gartner Magic Quadrant in the SIEM category. Gartner's comments about that said that their product had some quality and stability issues. This is not me saying that. This is the Gartner folks after they've talked to actual Alien Vault customers. They had a lower than average score for all the reference customers they talked to. Alien Vault also does not have a real-time CMDB. As we mentioned before, the AccelOps tool has the ability to self-learn all the devices and applications attached to your network and keep that current in real time. That's not available through the Alien Vault platform today. We also provide performance and application monitoring. That's also not part of the Alien Vault tool today, as well as the single pane of glass ability to see all these threat feeds and analytics through one tool. Again, this is a key differentiator that AccelOps brings to the market. That's why we put so much emphasis on that at the beginning of the presentation.
And I'd also add a few more points on there as well, Mike. You know, the analytics within AccelOps is very powerful, very flexible. What this means is that you can ingest hundreds of thousands of events per second if you have that requirement or more. It's cross real-time across all of the appliances, the virtual appliances. We'll perform real-time rule correlation as well. And you can query large amounts of data because we're using our own proprietary, highly scalable, NoSQL database that was designed for this sort of data. We're not using a typical relational database to do these sorts of high demand type of analytic queries. I'd argue one of the other additional differentiators as well. And it's very easy to use Excel. Very straightforward.
Yes, a number of our competitors do have a threshold on the EPS. You answered one of the questions that was already thrown out there. That's something we're still testing the limits on. We have the ability to do, like you said, hundreds of thousands of events per second very seamlessly and easily, which is key for any organization who is growing fast, adding a number of chatty firewalls such as Palo Alto, which ingests a lot of information. That's a very good source of analytics for us. So we don't want to slow that feed down. There was also a question about the, it's kind of related to the synthetic transactions. Can you talk a little bit about that, Dan, what synthetic transaction is and how could somebody use that today?
Okay, yeah, synthetic transactions. I often work around this to give you an example. In a former life, I used to work in a security operations team, and we had a managed IDS service that was outsourced. They did a good job in general, but from time to time they wouldn't tell me that there was a security incident, a denial of service that was occurring. And the first person that would tell me about it would be the business service owner, who would be ringing up to say why can't they access their particular website. Now, what synthetic transaction monitoring will do is actually go off to a TCP service, a website, perform various transactions on a website, perform DNS queries, database queries, and check what the response time is, and tell you if we see a deviation or a threshold exceeding. And you can also use the synthetic transactions to give you availability and SLA reports to confirm what the availability of that actual service is. So it's around performance and availability monitoring, but in my particular use case, so I could have really have done with synthetic transactions to tell me when I'm under a denial of service as well. Great,
thanks. I'll answer this one last question because we're getting to the top of the hour, but there's a question about, do we offer AccelOps threat analysis classes, i.e. configuring AccelOps for threat analysis? I'll take that, and if you want to embellish it on Dan, we did just roll out AccelOps University, which is the ability to take online training through our tool today, so you can ingest the data at your own pace, at your own speed, and on any device. And we also have professional services engagements where we can send trainers out to your site and help you and your teams get up to speed quickly with the tools. But we have a number of methods to get you up to speed quickly. With that, I think we'll close the session. There's a few more questions that we'll shoot back answers to after this webinar, and we'll also provide you links to the recording of the webinar. Appreciate your attention today and the great questions that we had thrown back to us. As always, appreciate your time in joining these sessions, and love your feedback on whether it was useful for your time or not, or any other subjects you might want us to be focusing on in the future. Please let us know. If you want to get a demo of our product, we've got the slide up there now. info@accelops.com, or if you want to call us directly at 408-490-0903. That goes directly into our Silicon Valley office, and we'll be happy to help you there. And Dan, thanks for your time today, as well as all the information that you were able to convey to the team. I think it was a good session. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Great weekend.
Bye-bye.